You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
A lot of people start with management. I start with the project. Like, is the project actually good? Because there's a lot of good management, but really bad projects, unfortunately. And I think what we have is a shortage of good projects in this industry. We see a lot of recycling of the old assets. I think we have to improve something about the industry where the capital goes. It has to start going into smarter projects, because I think until it doesn't, we're going to be burning it on a lot of poor projects, lifestyle companies. It is a problem in this sector, unfortunately. Big dreams are sold over small mines.
Welcome to Mining Stock Education. My name is Brian Lenny. Today with me, I have Joanna Ponicka, who is an exploration geologist and co-founder of Equivest Capital. Today, our discussion is going to completely revolve around mineral exploration. Joanna, it's great to have you. I think it's best that we start off with an introduction to yourself and your companies, Equivest Capital and Equivest Metals.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me, and looking forward to the discussions. I'm a geologist by background, 12 years in exploration right now. Started with Anglo-American and mineral exploration. Got at the top of the cycle, so rode it down, moved into the oil and gas, back in the mineral exploration 4 years ago. And I'm also an investor in the sector, so I wear different hats, and did quite a lot of portfolio management, so selling acreage, helping with acquisitions, divestments, joint venture deals. It's quite a broad spectrum, and now also a technology. So we have Equivest Capital that focuses on investments in the exploration sector, mainly early stage discoveries. But we also have Equivest Metals that focuses on generation of early stage ideas, as we really see there is a gap in good ideas in this sector. And we also use quite a lot of technology, so the AI data science part is coming into that space as well. My partner is data scientist, so that was an easy match.
Excellent. And so in terms, you started off in the field as an exploration geologist first, and then I guess became an investor. How did it influence how you deploy money as an investor into the sector?
I think it definitely helps to be geologist and understand the rocks. So I definitely rely on that knowledge. It's, a lot of people start with management. I start with the project. Like, is the project actually good? Because there's a lot of good management, but really bad projects, unfortunately. And I think what we have is a shortage of good projects in this industry. We see a lot of recycling of the old assets and very few new ideas, unfortunately.
Right. Oh, and so with the Equivest Metals, it sounds like you're a prospect generator or a project generator. Why that versus the idea of sole exploration? Is there something that differentiates the two?
Yeah, so at the moment, we actually focusing on delivering more like a consultancy regional studies. So as you saw, we already involved with BHP Xplor project and hoping to work long-term with BHP. We do own some properties ourselves as well. But our goal is actually to be no boots on the ground, completely desktop based, and become really good at coming up with new ideas and crunching the data. As I think what we're trying to do it in this sector, we spread out too thin across, coming up with the ideas, project generation, doing deals, drilling, dealing with landowners. There's just such a wide spectrum. It actually requires completely different skills. So this is, we really want to be in this early stage part of the exploration and focus on that area more. At least that's the current plan. Things might change over the next years as well. I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what is the good business model. And I think it's not a straight cut answer, but it also goes down to how much do you own as a shareholder? Because I think if I would actually say prospect generator is a better model if you can be private and if you can have very small base of shareholders that own larger stake, because then you're still going to have quite a lot of projects and opportunities. I think, what we see right now in the sector as well with BHP Xplor coming in, you have a good idea as a person, you can even start a new company. So the opportunity is huge. And we saw with the King's Road deal that there can be a significant funding offer for many years to junior explorers as long as they have good ideas and know how to mature them. So I think game is maybe changing a little bit, and I hear from more companies that they are aiming to stay private actually with solid investor raises.
Right. And that's a tough game to play too. You've obviously been able to attract the attention of the largest mining company in the world, which speaks volumes about what your ideas are. And so I guess it's a two-part question. First is, what is BHP Xplor? And secondly, how did you get the attention of the number one or the largest mining company in the world?
I think we can start with what the program is. So it's 6 months accelerator. It definitely is an accelerator. We've been very busy, but it's been an incredible journey. So you learn everything from mineral system framework that BHP uses, their best exploration practices, and they're very generous at sharing. So that's like something we didn't expect from a major. You get a lot of skills on the operations, business strategy, communications as well. So it's a very broad program, very fast, very focused, nothing what you would expect from the major, and the speed you would not expect from the major. And the companies get $500,000 US grant that can be spent towards the program and also exploration on the ground. And after 6 months, it's a long interview process, basically. You have an opportunity to go into a long-term partnership with BHP if you are successful and the project is something they're looking at. So most of the companies that takes part in is already, has acreage, is exploring, and they bring the specific projects to BHP. So the work focuses around those projects that BHP might be interested in. We were a bit of a unicorn and test first time this year where we actually came with more of a technology and workflows. And we did a very large prospectivity study for them in Southern Africa region, covering several countries, looking at sedimentary copper basin, applying everything from mineral systems, data science, AI, and also data platforms and infrastructure that can power big data sets. So it's been busy 6 months. It was absolutely brilliant, and also getting feedback from technical people in BHP sort of helps us to go in the right direction as well.
Wow. And so I guess this is broadly speaking, but that is a lot of sharing on BHP's part. So what do you think is the driver between these senior mining companies investing in juniors, whether it's investing in them for, let's say, a strategic equity stake or actually at the project level? What are they gaining from that sort of deal?
I will not speak specifically about BHP as that part is confidential, but I'll talk more broadly about other majors as well. Like what we're seeing is, I think the number one driver is always a project. Like it's about portfolio and fitting a new project into portfolio that makes sense, the ground that they are interested in. I didn't see any major sort of doing anything outside of that box that is the key driver. But also, I think if you think about how exploration works for a major, I had the opportunity to experience that in a bad way, actually. Starting my career with Anglo American, we had a huge department in exploration that took 12 years to build. And we had 6 drill rigs just on a project I was working, exploring. There were 4 other projects in Brazil with multiple drill rigs turning, plenty of people, and we did everything ourselves. We didn't have partners. And that operation was dissolved like in months, basically. Pretty much the entire exploration department just went down to a handful of people. So you can think about like the cycles, the effort that it takes to build and train and make cohesive organization that can execute on exploration programs. I think junior explorers, if they can do it right, are quite nice extension of exploration for majors. And if you look into oil and gas industry, like I have that background as well, you have so many juniors working with majors, you always have 3-4 partners on the project. So you work in the joint ventures, and it's spreads your risks, but also make sure that the knowledge flows and you have all kinds of ideas and brainstorming happening. We don't see that much in the sector, unfortunately.
Right. And so what do you think that disconnect is? There's definitely a difference between how a major operates and how a junior operates. But what do you think the major difference is in terms of the approach?
I think majors are looking for very different size of the assets, and they have very different risk appetite. So, if you look at the average junior sector, it would be maybe an old mine that we're just trying to drill a couple of holes around and see if we can increase it like 20%. And of course, it's nothing that major is interested in. And majors look for projects that can last decades. So the top tier 1 discoveries, or also large strategic big belt positions. So also, the area we operate in, we do quite large regional studies where it's not a single deposit, but multiple deposits can be found and sustain production for many years. So it's actually thinking in terms of what do we need versus in terms of what can we find easily and sell to investors. I think it's
so what would you deem as regional scale? Like, is there a minimum hectares that you would say, okay, above that is what I would deem regional?
Yeah, we work with quite large belts. So for instance, last year we did Scandinavia, and then we focused really on Finland. So we did entire Finland. This year we did 2 million kilometers square in Southern Africa. That's a couple of countries, right? So we really try to define the system. Sometimes the systems are smaller, sometimes they're very large, and try to solve that system that already looks prospective. So we actually don't go and sort of do projects wherever. We do pre-work to make sure that we actually go, if we're going to spend 4 to 6 months on something, it's a system that can deliver large deposits. And we just need to crunch the data, crunch the numbers, and figure it out.
So, obviously what we would sort of deem tier 1 jurisdictions, there's a lot of competition, and the size of land packages you're talking about, I don't think you're going to be able to go to Nevada and take out, 50,000 or 60,000 hectares and go at it. So does looking at systems that are this big with the geological potential that I think that you're describing, do you have to go to the more far-flung places or take on more jurisdictional risk to get that?
That's what we initially thought that would be the case. And I think there are some of those instances absolutely exist. Sort of tier 1 jurisdictions are getting busy. We focus a lot on the undercover exploration as well. And actually, when you look into a lot of tier 1 jurisdiction, like the license ownership stops where the cover starts. So we get very thin after that, as nobody knows what's literally happening. Nothing is outcropping on the surface. So it's a much more difficult exploration, and you need to know where to start in those systems. So you need to process the data and understand the system.
So where do you start? You're looking undercover. You can't see, like you said, there's no outcrop. So what is the starting position for?
We use information over the cover to extrapolate under the cover. So we use a lot of data. We know the systems continue, and it's to understand where they continue and how they continue. So we do have a lot of geophysical data. We sometimes have even geochemical data. We have various magnetotelluric data sets, deeper crustal data sets that can help us reconstruct those systems. And we also use machine learning algorithms to use what outcrops to predict what sort of sits under the cover.
What do you feel? So there's a big contrast, at least for me. I'm an investor in the sector in terms of trusting geophysics versus trusting geochemical. For me, I'm not a geologist, but I'm much more comfortable trusting geochemical than I am geophysics. Do you see much of a difference, or do you see equal weighting in terms of how you view them?
I actually don't trust any of them. So let's start with that. I think there is... This is a thing where there's this stark contrast as well between mineral exploration and oil and gas industry. So I'll give you an example from oil and gas and then tell you what it looks like in mineral exploration. So in oil and gas, there's a petroleum system. which is a way of working, a way of collecting data and asking questions about subsurface and geology. And you typically have 4 elements, such as, do you have a source rock to produce hydrocarbons, and is it good? Do you have reservoir that can hold those hydrocarbons, and what is its quality? Do you have a trap that you can trap hydrocarbons in? You spend quite a lot of time describing it, mapping it, understanding it. And do you have a seal that can kind of seal off that structure and maintain hydrocarbons there over the time? And after that, you have geophysics, which is, do you have what we call DHI, which is direct hydrocarbon indicator? And if you started drilling those direct hydrocarbon indicators in oil and gas, your success rate maybe would be 5-10%, which is pretty poor for oil and gas exploration, because the average one is 30, goes up to 40% these days in some of the basins. So you're severely underperforming, and your cost of drilling one well might cost, $100 million, $50 million, depending like what type of water depths you're drilling, right? So you cannot afford to have 5-10% success rates as the bottom line. So that's why we use petroleum systems, and we try to ask the right questions, map the geology. And if we see that we have a good chance of success from petroleum system work, and also we have direct hydrocarbon indicators, our geophysics, that's normally when we're starting to see really good success rates. So this 30, 40, 50% success rates. And it took industry, 30 years to develop that cycle and make some mistakes on the way as well. Some people started drilling just the geophysics instead of doing the geology. But I think what we do in mineral exploration, like, we don't have the mineral systems. Like, the companies don't use them. And if they think they use them, they don't, because that's not what mineral systems look like. And I think, there's just very few companies that I saw having something resembling mineral systems, and majors are moving that direction as well. But we tend to drill what is anomalies. We tend to drill geophysical and geochemical anomalies that are maybe footprints of something, but they also occur in a lot of places where geology isn't good, or deposit is small because the system is not there to produce anything sizable. So we don't figure out the system. We don't study the elements of mineral system. We just study the response of it if it exists, basically.
So am I understanding you correct? Are you basically saying that you want to see the overlap of numerous things before it's a viable target? Is that okay? So
a good example from work we did with BHP, we have over 50 layers of data that actually describe different processes of mineral system that can tell us something, where is more likely the major deposit to be located in context of every single of those layers of the process that we would like to map to track the formation of large deposits. And after that, we apply all the data science, machine learning on top of that. So it's a longer workflow, basically, but you can do it over very large basins. It's impossible to do it over, the postage stamp area. You have to step out and start to look at the larger systems.
Cost is definitely something that we've seen rise, especially over the last couple of years with inflation. But really, whether it's a decade or 2 decades, the cost of discovery has gone through the roof. And I was wondering, in your view, and I think you've kind of hinted at it to some extent, how much of the inflation related to cost is related to wasteful spending, or let's say incompetence to a certain degree?
I think there is inflation for sure, like the drilling costs are up, but we also are in a cyclical industry. So they sort of come up and go down and come up again. But, I think last year was $14 billion spent on exploration. That's insane amount of money. And $7 billion by juniors. I'm actually surprised who are the investors that gave them $7 billion to the junior exploration market. That's huge. So, kind of being on the two sides of the sectors, like doing the generative work of the ideas, but also being an investor, I think we have to improve something about the industry where the capital goes. It has to start going into smarter projects, because I think until it doesn't, we're going to be burning it on a lot of poor projects, lifestyle companies. It is a problem in this sector, unfortunately. And big dreams are sold over small mines.
You do totally. And you know what? It's an interesting dichotomy between the importance of marketing and the importance of doing good work. And I've seen it on both accounts where there's companies that don't deserve the market caps that they're receiving, but they are experts when it comes to marketing and telling their story. The flip side, a lot of the best geological teams I've talked to, not all of them, but I think put too less emphasis on marketing and aren't able to sell their story because they are so technical oriented. And I'm often told, oh, well, the results will speak for themselves. What do you think of that? What do you think about this thing between marketing and...
You 100% spot on. Like, I think you need to nail all the parts of the equation. Like, you have to do good work, be in the right place. But if you also want to get capital, especially if you list it at good prices, then you need that marketing part. And you need to find a balance between sort of overselling and driving your share price too high. Then they usually really crash from those levels as well when you don't deliver. I think you need to find some good balance of those elements. And we have a lot of companies reach out as well. Like, do you know any projects in this jurisdiction, that jurisdiction? They're looking for copper, looking for nickel, uranium, whatever. It's just so much driven with like the capital raise part, because it's never about is the project good, but does it have a drill hole that I can sell to investors that looks good? Because I need to raise money, and is this the hottest commodity that is around there? And I think if you're selling this dream and the project is bad, you're really risking, getting some unhappy investors on your register that you will disappoint over next year.
How do you're an investor too. So you said that the project is your number one thing that you look at. But take me through that process. So let's say the project checks the boxes that you want to see. Okay, so you look at management, you look at all those other factors. How do you delineate what comes next in the priority list?
I think number one, as I mentioned, is geology. So it's if we don't have already any data sets over that area or haven't done any work, then I would try to get whatever is public available and get through that data and check that the elements of system are there. And we also focus much more on the early stage discoveries. So typically you have a very short time to decide if you want to participate in it, if you want, good entry price as they move fast. It can be 2 days and you're up 200%. So you need to act fast. So sometimes I act fast and then I spend a few days figuring out if this is something that looks actually like it has a potential to turn into a tier 1 project. And if it doesn't, then it's often a sell. It's usually sell with the profits because everybody's excited as well that you're riding momentum. So you kind of get 1 to 2 weeks to do the evaluation, check the team as well. But we started initially in the early stage exploration projects, but the issue was like we maybe could find 5 companies that we were interested in. And I think you see this as well, this year BHP had almost 600 applications, ends up with 6. So I think that's what we're looking at. And a lot of those projects that BHP is funding, they would not get funding from normal markets, right? So you kind of sometimes like projects in the company, but that like they're not going to get drilled because they're too early stage, they're too risky, and they don't drive the share price if they fail, or they might not produce a good hole, basically.
So again, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're doing the discovery investing where you're waiting for results before you jump into whether it's a sole explorer or a prospect generator. You're waiting for results before you deploy money into a company.
That's the core strategy, and it actually, especially when you're busy, it makes your work so much easier. As you look at maybe at maximum 1 to 3 opportunities per year. So I do have my network and have different signals as well that we gather from the markets and jump on those when they look good, basically.
We were talking about Europe. And Europe, I guess, from my point of view anyways, it has mixed reviews in terms of jurisdictional risk. And I think you have both contrasts where I think at the top, you have some really good jurisdictions. And then conversely, you have some places where I don't think you'll ever see any type of development work. So in your view, what will be the best jurisdiction within the European or the EU in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of mining investment attractiveness?
This is an excellent question with so many levels of what good looks like as well. Let's start with that. So I think if we're looking from perspective of actually making large discoveries, there are jurisdictions in Europe that can deliver them. We scan through entire Europe, and for us, when it comes to the battery metals, sort of copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium, Sweden and Finland are top jurisdictions. And they actually do have pretty friendly mining law. Apart from that, the Finnish law got more difficult still. So it was an easier jurisdiction to do exploration. Now it's getting a bit more tricky, the early stages of exploration. And the best areas in Scandinavia as well are located in the regions where we have native people, Sami people as well. So they are challenging in those respects. I think Anglo-American nickel copper discovery made in 2012, I think. That's still sitting there with little progress, right? It's a good quality discovery, of course. Now nickel is what it is, but it has more copper in it than nickel. I think it was 1.8% copper, 45 million tons with nickel, platinum, palladium as well. So it's a good project and plenty of exploration potential. EU is doing a lot of changes in the area. So we already saw early stage funding showing up for the advancements of the projects. I think there's 2 billion euros already lying on the table for exploration, but for development projects. The scary thing about that is when you see where some of this money already went, these are projects that make completely no sense economically. Like we're talking like a project where people are already protesting that they don't want to have it open and has lithium in micas at like 0.5%. And this is like the kind of projects that we are funding basically. So I think there is a willingness and there is money that's starting to move, but I think there is lack of understanding and knowledge what economic both size and grade looks like across the different commodities.
Right. And so what do you think spurs that change to get away from poor investment? Like usually as an investor, you have to lose some money before you really smarten up and start making better choices. So is that the same thing in this case?
I think maybe that's going to be the case for European Commission. It's difficult to understand that, they do have various advisors and produce various reports, but like when you start looking at like the recommendations they make on some of the assets, you're like, it's not a robust project. Like, what are we doing? We have some good projects, so they probably will receive funding as well. But I think we do have still exploration potential. Like, for instance, Finland, Scandinavia, like mainly gold exploration for the last 4 decades. So you have quite a lot of opportunity to do the base metals and the data sets, like a lot of public, free, good quality data as well. So it's a good place to start.
Do you have a preference when it comes to metal? Is there something that attracts your mind?
I do like all the sort of base metals, cobalt, copper, nickel. But nickel used to be my favorite, and I guess now it's not. I did sell all my nickel stocks before the prices crashed and the Indonesian killed the party. I think I was one of the first people telling, the party is going to come to the end. But it is, it's kind of like a little bit like shale oil revolution. It's we have a new processing workflow that is now extracting sulfides from laterites, and they can go also in the batteries. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, like the Indonesian growth has been crazy, and it's really overpowered that whole sector. So you said you liked nickel previously. The work and then the work that you're doing now, it sounds like you said sedimentary copper exploration in Africa. So do you think copper is the attraction? I guess BHP and the major mining companies, this is kind of, you can see it kind of happening across the world, but that seems to be the forefront is copper exploration for base metals. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think you also have shortages, even if you don't assume all the, electrification, electric cars and so on coming in, you still see copper shortages. So it is probably the most robust story that we have when it comes to the metals. I think lithium will bounce back as well because, we can find a lot of lithium because we never looked for it. So it's really easy to find large deposits. But I think we will also, the forecast sort of assumed a lot of these projects will go into production, and they don't. So you need higher prices for a lot of them probably to secure funding and move forward.
When it comes to copper exploration, we're usually talking about size, whether it's with the porphyries, but I think the sedimentary hosted deposits can get fairly big too. Or is it tougher? Because to me, the first two areas that come up is South America and probably Africa. Is there any, what do you think about the geological potential for copper in Canada or the US? Is it on the same scale as it is in South America and Africa?
There is actually a lot of really interesting basins across the world that have the potential, have been either a little bit explored or never explored. So there's definitely growth potential, and I won't be surprised if we see more majors moving into that space, as I think porphyry exploration is quite, advanced. And as you mentioned, the sedimentary hosted copper projects, they actually can have very high tonnage and much better grades than porphyries. So all of these projects in Zambia, Congo, they can run up to like 1 billion tons at like 1.5–2% copper plus byproducts. Some of the smaller ones, you have like 200–300 million tons at 3%. So they are good projects. And there is actually Europe is one of the largest copper producers in the world, which nobody knows. But there is actually the Kupferschiefer at more or less 1,000-meter depth. It's an horizon that is very enriched in copper and just disappears deeper and deeper. So it's below sort of economic depths. But it's the large mining operations just on border with Germany and Poland. And Germany used to be a big producer as well until the Second World War. So Polish company is actually 6th largest copper producer in the world. So I don't think politicians in Europe are even aware of that. We do have a lot of copper in Europe, and I think we can also push the depths with technology, maybe robotics in the future. There are some significant ores lying at depth that are actually explored by oil and gas exploration that we used to also have onshore Europe. So it's a lot of decades of good knowledge.
Interesting. I was reading one of the articles on your website, and it was an exploration strategy blog, and you had 2 points. You said economic discovery in a timely manner and beating the odds 1 in 1,000. In terms of greenfield exploration, what do you deem as a timely manner in terms of making a discovery or, I guess, killing a project?
That's one of the aspects. Killing them would help. I think it's a difficult thing. It's like, many companies I talk to or advise for them, they have serious difficulty of letting their projects go. Sometimes they are dead to them for 3–4 years, but because they promise investors that this is some, significant discovery or has significant potential, they kind of have to hold on and pretend and still spend capital on those projects. So we definitely moving slower than we could, and we are not focused. I think, there's a lot of sort of go into the field, collect the samples, but why are you even collecting them? What is the purpose? What are you trying to understand? What are you learning about system? You're just walking around and looking for something, as often seems to be the case. And the same way we drill, it's a lot of drilling targets is just geochemistry at best geophysics based. And if you ask companies like, what is your model? Why here? It's like you can't get those answers. So I think we have to shift a little bit and be more focused at killing, and be more focused at asking critical questions. But that definitely requires shift from the investor side as well. So I think it's two need to change.
And now I got a general question for you, and it's something that I was interested in that happened, I guess it was last year or later last year. Agnico Eagle invested into Canada Nickel, who has a nickel sulfide project in Northern Ontario. And of course, Agnico Eagle is a major gold mining company, and Canada Nickel has a nickel sulfide. And so I never understood the deal to begin with. And it was a good chunk of money. And I was asking a group of friends of mine, like, why do you think that deal happened? And one of them said, well, you know, these large nickel or prospective nickel areas are obviously very high prospective for gold. Do you concur? Was that kind of go in? I'm not asking about Agnico Eagle into Canada, but the question is whether high nickel or sulfide exploration potential coincides with high gold potential.
Absolutely. They serve, not necessarily has to be high nickel potential, but just nickel and gold deposits tend to sit together. I don't think there is a correlation with high grade nickel and high grade gold. They actually produce during very different phases of geological history, but they tend to sit together as there are some overlaps in the systems. So it's definitely, you know, many belts that have nickel have gold. Finland, Western Australia, same as you mentioned, Quebec areas, Canada nickel. But that project is, I think, it's a very low grade nickel. I cracked in my head many times, like why majors, also Anglo American, went into that project. I think like year and a half ago. Even when we knew already that Indonesia was going to flood the markets, because, you know, we saw, I think it was yesterday, announcement from BHP that they closed the Nickel West operations that have, I think, double the grade of those projects that Canada Nickel has. So I don't know. It's been a bit of like this wave of the low grade nickel projects, but I don't think they ever could compete with the laterites even.
What about the whole ESG type of movement? Like I wonder if that's part of it, whether it's the political side of investment and development. Because in Canada, for instance, like they put billions of dollars into the battery plants. The politician, like kind of what we're talking about, they really don't have any concept of the whole supply chain. And so I wonder if some of these companies see the writing on the wall where, you know, you may not be able to secure supply that gets diverted through China. Even though I come from steel manufacturing, I worked at a school, I worked 10 years in steel manufacturing. We would have steel come over from Europe, some of the Eastern European nations, and it'd be dumped into Ontario at fractions of the cost. But then we lobbied the government, and the steel ended up still coming in. But what I'm trying to say is that this whole idea of security of supply could become somewhat of an issue. I'm not sure how to weight that. Do you think that's part of it, along with the ESG investment, where these companies seemingly, you know, look at the divestment in coal? You know, we've seen these coal companies or tech, you know, sell off their coal portion that's making money, but they got rid of it just because they couldn't attract, you know, some funds into their shares. And so it's an interesting dichotomy, because I get what you're saying.
I think this is, you know, one of the aspects, and we see similar projects in Europe as well, waiting in the queue for those funds from government. And, you know, we seen them freed up in the last year on some of the assets, but I think that's everybody's bet that the government will be subsidizing some of the Western projects. I'm kind of like want to see it happen, to be honest.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. It's a very good point.
I think the big aspect is also going to be, you know, being good at when we say marketing as an exploration company. I think if you want to secure government funding, you also need to be good at putting your project in front of politicians and them being aware of that. So I think you need to do different types of marketing here. as well.
On the technological front, what do you think is going to be the next big improvement that we see coming?
I think from my perspective, it's really a combination of everything. It's like, everybody's looking for silver bullet. And as geologists, after many years, I gave up. There's no silver bullets. I think that the point is like, we need to understand the systems and bring as much data as we can to answer the questions about those systems. And when we see that we are able to assign different scores of probability based on the data, then we can start moving towards those higher probability opportunities. And we're seeing advances of machine learning, data science coming in. I think it will make a dent, but I really hope that we don't forget about the building of the mineral system framework, because sort of giving a lot of data to algorithms is not always the answer, unless you have to direct them a little bit into the right way, or you also have to do that work in the right location from the start. So a little bit what we're seeing in the sector, especially the more service-oriented AI machine learning companies, they are sort of focused on servicing anybody. So even if you have your old mine, they can crunch your data and find a target for you. But I think I personally would love to see those technologies moving more on unlocking the new discoveries and starting to do this work in the right places.
Joanna, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. How can our viewers, follow your work?
The best is Twitter. It's Equivest Xplor right now. I can double check for you.
I'll put the link in the description.
Perfect. Thank you. And also, I am personally more active on LinkedIn. So that's Joanna Ponicka. Especially like if you are in the industry and you don't maybe hang out on Twitter, it's mainly investors on Twitter. Then LinkedIn will be starting to put more content as well. And sharing some of the insights from investors as well, which I think are useful.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the chat today, and hopefully we talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.